Everyday Spy. One life, no compromises. Now, I want to talk for a few minutes, if we can. I want to talk about Tradecraft because it's something I don't often get to talk about with people. And I don't know what the FBI or KGB, I don't know what limitations they put on you about what you can and can't say. But the primary limitation
no limitation.
Oh, that's awesome. So the primary limitation on me is a lifetime secrecy agreement with CIA. But I would love to talk to you about it because you're going to know what I'm talking about. And that's just so fulfilling.
Yeah. Here's an interesting tidbit with regard to secrecy agreement. You would think that I had to sign something like this for the KGB. The only thing I ever signed with my real name was a promise never to disclose the code that I was given for decryption and encryption, period. Everything else, nobody made me sign anything. I didn't sign up, so to speak. I just started working. But you know, I can obviously I can talk about what I was taught freely. Was taught by the KGB, and I believe as far as the foundational tradecraft, I got as good training as there was to be had within the KGB, and you know that they were pretty darn good. You know,
yeah, they still, well, I mean, KGB doesn't exist now, but they're new, but the branch off services of SVR and
yeah,
the FSB are still excellent. But tell me, what was your favorite operational act? What was your favorite type of field act?
Oh, counter surveillance, because we turned it into a game. I spent 2 years of my training I spent in Moscow, and it stands to reason. Nobody told me explicitly, but you know, there weren't too many illegals that they sent to the United States, so I was trained by the best. And so the fellow who showed me the tricks of the trade, he was a magician. I mean, one time he taught me something that I would have never tried to use. So he said, "Follow me for the next 10 minutes, and after 10 minutes, you tell me if I did something that was unusual." So, you know, he walks this way, that way, that way. After 10 minutes, I saw absolutely nothing. He said, "Misdirection." And he showed me a cartridge that he put into a flower bed. And I didn't see that because he somehow had me look that way. That's the kind of magic I said, I'm not going to learn this. I'm not good at it. But, you know, he taught me all the basics and also taught me, well, he corrected some of the things that I was taught in Berlin by people who weren't such experts, that were no-nos. One of them in Berlin, my teacher taught me to, you know, if you want to see if somebody follows you, just walk towards a display window and you see the people you're reflected in back of you. And this guy says, you can't do that because that pretty much indicates that you are looking who's following you. No, you need to be as natural as possible. Obviously, you don't turn your head. You just do everything, even though if you wander around in the city for 3 hours and go here, there, and everywhere, clearly the indication is that you are checking whether you're being followed, but there's no proof if you do it right.
I want to take a step back just because I love what you're saying, but I want to make sure our audience is keeping up with it too.
Yep. So, okay.
You're calling it counter surveillance, but I think what the term is that we're more familiar with in the U.S. is surveillance detection.
Oh, so, sure. Yeah.
Yeah. You were trained in surveillance detection, and then you had this master teacher who was teaching you kind of the advanced tools of detecting surveillance. And one of those advanced tools is looking like you are not going through a surveillance detection route.
Absolutely.
And in Hollywood and in the movies, they try to make all these clever tricks. like walking next to a mirrored window, and forcing people to come in close quarters by getting on an elevator. They do these things that if you do them in the field, a trained surveillance team is going to see that and know exactly what you're doing. And it's going to piss them off. And you're not actually going to lose them. They're just going to increase the size of their team the next time they follow you. All you're doing, like you said, all you're doing is highlighting to them that you have been trained in surveillance detection and you aren't very good at it.
Now, here's the thing. Yes, team. There's, to the extent I recall, I think that the team that followed me was pretty sizable, 8 to 10.
That is a good team, yeah.
So they would be able to switch who would be closest to me, because occasionally, if you really want to find out what somebody's doing, you got to have them pretty much as much as possible within sight at all times. That's where the benefit of what we call a dead zone comes in, where you turn around the corner and you disappear for a little bit.
We call it a gap, yeah.
Okay. So then if somebody was too close for too long, then they would switch. And typically, as I said, it's turned into a game. You know, we practiced this, and this was, it was me against them. Mm-hmm. They wrote a report when they were done, and I wrote my report. And it was my task to determine as to whether I was being followed, and if so, I had to describe at least one person that I knew was one of the folks following me, and they had to write a report as to where I was and whether they thought they were being discovered or not. I think we had about 10 of those exercises. I beat them 10 to nothing.
You had mentioned earlier that you felt yourself getting sloppy over time.
Yeah.
And that you knew that you were pretty good, so you could run an SDR, surveillance detection route. You were supposed to run it in 3 hours, but you felt pretty comfortable running it in 1 to 1.5 hours.
I did worse. It got really worse. And here's the problem. Okay, so I had a full-time job, and it was a demanding job. You know, it was a computer program, and you get calls at night. So the window of time that I had to do stuff shrunk. Mm-hmm. So, for instance, it was a hard and fast rule before I mail a letter that contained secret writing, drop it into a mailbox, that I would go onto one of those surveillance detection routes. It took me like 5-6 hours to compose the letter, and then another 3 hours, there goes your Saturday. So what I did instead, because I knew a lot of office buildings because I worked for 2 years as a bike messenger. So what I did instead, you know, I wrote the letter on a Sunday, and Monday I would make my way to an office building where they had mail chutes. And I would get off an elevator where there was nobody else getting off and just dropped it in the mail chute. Now, it's kind of silly because they had cameras, and I wasn't aware of the cameras, but anyway, this was sort of what I thought a reasonable shortcut. I would have been severely reprimanded if I had told the KGB. They had
and it would have been silly. It would have been silly to have been arrested and then find out at the trial that the way that they found you was because you dropped a letter down a mail chute and there was a camera on both ends. That would have been humiliating.
a lot of situations where agents were discovered were based on silly mistakes. There's a most famous, and you probably may not know that because it's German specific, but the most famous East German spy, as his name was Guinta Guillaume, was the right-hand person to the then Chancellor Willy Brandt. He worked for the Stasi, and he was discovered because some lead officer in the Stasi figured they would send him a birthday card.
The gift that keeps on giving.
Yeah, but silly little mistakes, and that's why this hard discipline appears to be so important. Except I don't know, and you got to be like you have to have the mindset of an accountant who cannot leave any detail, in an unfinished state. Maybe people like that can be that disciplined, but that goes now against the necessity to be creative as well in this job. So
exactly, it's a duality, and I've had friends of mine that I've spoken to talk about the duality, the challenge of being this seemingly aloof, enjoyable, carefree person that can attract other people to them.
Right.
Because that's how you win someone's trust and loyalty, because they want to be like you and they want to be with you. And then they're willing to spy because they trust you.
Right.
How do you show that veneer, but what you're covering up is this extremely detail-oriented, highly focused, almost obsessive-compulsive person behind it all? How do you do both of those things at the same time?
Well, the same dichotomy applies to lying and telling the truth.
And the same breath, right? And somehow we find a way to do that.
You're supposed to tell the truth to the folks that you're working for, and then you're lying to everybody else. But sometimes, I told you already, I mix it up.
Yeah, exactly right.
You get used to it. Hey, lying is not too bad. I'm trying to. Go ahead.
No, you had mentioned before that some of the people who have been caught in the past got caught because they made a mistake. Now, I've been fortunate to teach espionage all over the world. And one of the lessons that I always try to get across to people is that espionage is a game of professionals. Everybody is well trained. Everybody is detail oriented. Everybody is focused. Everybody has a lot to lose if they get caught, and they have a lot to gain if they succeed.
Right.
So it's not really a game where you're trying to beat somebody else by having more skills than they have. It's really a game where you're trying to be the one who doesn't make a mistake, because you want your opponent to make the mistake first. It's almost like chess instead of something like any other game, like a backgammon. It's not about your strategy. It's about being consistent long enough that somebody else screws up first.
It's like in tennis, the unforced error will kill you every time.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly right. Because that error is what shows your hand. It's what puts you on the radar. It's what makes you vulnerable to capture or arrest. Because that professional surveillance team that's following you every day, all day, they're waiting for that one moment where you make a mistake so that they can build the case they need to wrap you up.
I got a friend who, I have a few friends now who used to be in this business. I have a friend who used to operate in Italy, worked for naval intelligence. And he would tell me that, that they would frequent certain hangouts where they knew there were agents from the East and the West, and they were trying to recruit each other. And they were playing this, this game with each other. And sometimes you had an advantage if you knew that one, he's from the East, and they didn't know where you were from. So this is the typical mind game. So the advantage that you have if you know the other person is phenomenal. If you know who they are. Yeah,
absolutely. So you didn't ask, but I'm going to tell you anyways. My favorite operational act has always been dead drops. I am a total sucker for dead drops, and there's a number of reasons why. The first reason that I love dead drops is because there's nobody else involved in the moment that you either drop the dead drop or pick it up. So you never have to worry about spending a 3-hour surveillance detection route to get somewhere where you then have to spend 2 hours looking over your shoulder to make sure nobody sees you. It's like 3 hours to get somewhere, and then 10 seconds later, your dead drop is placed, and then you're back on with your happy life, going wherever you go next. So I always like that. But I also always like the fact that there is so much specific targeted communication that has to go into a dead drop, because not only do you have to drop something very small and very specific someplace, but you have to communicate to somebody else exactly how to find that place. And you can't let them, you can't send them someplace in general and say, hey, it's under the bush, because they're going to spend 3 hours digging around every bush, and it's going to look terrible. Everybody around them is going to wonder, what is that guy doing, right? So
Right.
we have to give such express instructions, and you have to give those instructions in a way that's memorable and a way that's specific so that you can protect the asset. So dead drops were always one of my favorites. I don't know, what was your experience with dead drops?
Well, you just said a few things that brought back memories.
I
You're
hope they're
right.
good memories.
No, I had only one dead drop operation that failed, and I don't want to get into that. Means, as you know, the person who drops the object also signals somewhere nearby that he just did drop the object.
Right.
And I found the signal, and I went to the spot that I had found and described myself, and there was no object. So whatever. But you're talking about describing the location perfectly so that somebody who reads it can find it. I was considered to be that good that they actually took a couple of my descriptions and showed them to others for training purposes. As a matter of fact, with one exception, the drop operation that I performed in New York, I found all the spots myself, except for the very first one, and that was horrendous. It was out in the open, in a park where there were a lot of people milling around. There was no dead zone. There was no cover. Somebody easily could have seen it. This guy just dropped something here, and say, "Hey, listen, don't drop this garbage over here." Usually, you drop something that nobody would think worth picking up. But if somebody in Germany, they would immediately say, "What? Pick that up again. Throw it in the garbage." there goes your $10,000 that you just wanted to handle. So that I felt really, really bad about this particular location, and that was found by one of those employees of the United Nations, diplomatic cover. He did a lousy job, and I complained about it.
So, I mean, dead drops have been the downfall of Hansen. Hansen was taking dead drops of making and taking dead drops of cash in exchange for dead drops of printed confidential material. That's how he was sharing his information with the Russians. So, a sloppy dead drop, a poorly executed dead drop, not only is it going to kill your operation, it is demonstrable proof of what you are doing.
Absolutely right. Absolutely
I always saw it. Yeah, I always saw it as one of those operational acts that really helped to separate the professionals from some of the amateurs, because
I don't know if
there's no room for errors.
I don't know if the same thing happens to you. As I'm walking around in cities and places where I've never been, I notice spots. I say, "Well, this one would be really good.
Yeah.
That's usable." I can't
That's
help
exactly
myself.
what happens. That's a great signal site over there, or that's a great dead drop site right there. Sometimes I'll even see something and I'll think to myself, that's got to be a signal. That's a load signal for sure. Somewhere there's a dead drop that got placed, because everything about that placement and everything about, why is there a chalk mark on that wall? That for sure is either a training scenario, or somebody is committing espionage. Right. Especially if you're walking through a major city or a city that's like a large commuter city near a primary city. That's a dead giveaway.
For my signal spots, I always prefer to find what we call a dead zone. So in other words, you turn the corner and you make a quick mark and nobody sees it. If nobody sees it, whoever is behind you, and if somebody follows you, by definition, they are behind you. I use chalk marks.
Chalk's popular, yeah. Chalk's popular. The thing that's hard is that in the modern world, chalk sticks out. So you've got to find something that's a little bit less obvious.
Yeah.
Magnets are another thing that I think fits better in the modern world.
What about
work really well in the modern world.
Duct tape.
Duct tape and reflective tape, that kind of stuff, because all of a sudden, if you're in a construction site and you know that construction site is a safe place for a dead drop signal, now you can put up a piece of reflective tape and it blends in with the construction site, but it sticks out from a distance for the person you're trying to signal to.
And again, you need to be very precise as to the description where that signal is to be either placed or found.
Exactly right. Exactly right. Because if somebody thinks that they see a signal that's not really there, then they go to a valid dead drop site where there's nothing.
Yeah.
But they burn the site by being there. They burn the site by searching.
Cannot be used. And by the way, there was a rule: never ever to use the same site twice.
Never use the same site twice. So now when you talk about the administrative side of espionage, you put time and effort into coming up with 150 operational sites, and then you burn them one at a time. You definitely don't want to lose one for nothing, because you can never use that site again.
In the New York area, I think I spent at least a week working full time, the equivalent of a week full time, to find a site that is usable. You walk around and there's always a number of ways to say, no, this doesn't work, that doesn't work. No, this is too in the open. This one is too far into the park. You don't want to do that either. This is in a dangerous section of the city, and on and on. And I for every one that I eventually decided to take, I would probably throw away 20 ideas.
Oh yeah, trying to find the right fit.
It's a lot of work. It's time consuming.
And then when you do find the right fit, it's only the right fit for the right type of asset.
Oh, that too.
If it's a female asset or an older person asset, everything changes. You can't send a female who happens to be a Muslim into the same place that you might be able to send a Caucasian male. Right. One might get more attention than the other. So now all of a sudden, of the 150 sites that you found, only half of them are usable to half of your asset pool. Everything changes.
And you shouldn't send a Caucasian into the heart of Harlem, right?
Yeah, it's not if you want them to go unnoticed.
Right. So, yeah, lots of work goes into this, and this is typically not known to the general public. They see the glamorous aspect. It's all there. Oh, we do this, we do that. The preparation for any operation is phenomenally expensive in terms of time. Yeah.
Yes. So tell me, Jack, how has your career in espionage, how has it benefited your everyday life? That's what Everyday Spy is all about. I know that you know the website. I know that you follow, and I appreciate the support.
Yep.
Tell me how your history in spying benefits you every day.
In two ways. This is, and it took me quite a while to figure this one out. First of all, I'm now at a point where I can sense people. I can read people in a way that 20, 30, 40 years ago I couldn't have done. And I think it has a lot to do with the fact that the spy business is people business. So every person that you come in contact with, you figure out who are they, and it becomes instinctive. You do it, and eventually what this turns into, you don't really, I give you an example. When I hired a lot of people into IT, initially I gave them technical questions. I stopped doing this. I just talked with them for a few minutes, and I knew I like this one and I like that one. I don't care about all the other stuff. And what I call this is subconscious pattern recognition. So the way people talk, what words they use, the inflection, the body language, the facial expressions, this all becomes what people call their gut. And I got to a point where I knew my gut was better than my brain. So and my wife, who is thank God the most critical person in my life, has acknowledged that I know people. But when she would say, well, this is a really nice man, says there's something wrong with this guy. 2 years later, she finds out something was wrong with this guy. Right. So that's number one. Number two is what you have to do as an intelligence operative. You have to constantly anticipate potential dangerous situations. So in other words, you have to project forward what could trip you up. So, and this has become a pattern of mine. I still do this all the time. I run through possible scenario, and if I see bad ones, then I take measures to avoid them. I just unfortunately have made the one mistake. And by the way, I discovered this through a conversation with you, that I shared the thought process with my wife. And so since all of these ideas are potential threats, negatives, she has determined that I'm a very negative person. I'm not. I just got to stop. I just got to stop sharing intermediate results, right?
Yes.
Because as a matter of fact, you and I could not survive in this business the way we did as negative people. You can't, because you're taking a risk, and you're taking some really big risks. And if you think negatively, you won't do it. You won't do it. Oh, this is not going to work. You have to be an optimist at heart to say, yes, I can do that, and it will work.
Exactly. You have to be the consummate optimist.
Yeah.
Who's willing to verbalize and acknowledge the risks, because you're in your heart, you have an optimistic perspective that you will overcome all the risks. You just have to identify them first. I compare that to some people I meet who think that if they just ignore a risk, it's going to go away. Right? There are people out there who think as long as I don't say something, it doesn't exist. And I'm like, no, you have to say it out loud. Share it with the world. Hey, this is a problem. I'm going to fix it. And that's how you go forward.
Right.
That's how you succeed.
So allow me to finish the answer with regard to how this has helped me.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
in my corporate career. That's okay. When I became a manager, my first real management job was managing a crisis. And then I went on to another, altogether half a dozen. Every time I was hired into a crisis or into a really bad situation. And I fixed every one of those. And then I got bored when it was fixed. But these traits that I had developed during my spy years came in really handy. I wasn't afraid. What bad could happen? If I failed, so what? I don't go to jail. I might get fired. But I wasn't afraid. I very quickly understood, the team that I was stepping into, and I was able to figure out, all the threats that could come at us as a group. And literally, I walked out of these situations every time having made something pretty bad, and in one or two instances threatening to the very existence of the corporation, into something that worked very well. Yeah. They don't pay you for that enough.
No, they really don't. But the perspective that you just laid out, where you talk about, what risk am I really taking? I might get fired. There are people who I have met who very realistically think that being fired is the worst thing that can happen to you.
Yeah, I know.
And I mean, I don't fault them that, because I think in the existence and in their experience in life, that is one of the worst things that can happen to them, right?
Well, emotionally,
what espionage has taught you and I'm going to just keep going.
Yeah.
What espionage has taught you and I is that somebody choosing to fire you is actually the other person's mistake, because you and I know what our own talent is. We know what our capabilities are. And I would challenge that most of the people out there who are high-performing, high-achieving workers, if they can come to the place where they value their talent, they will start to see more and more that losing their job because someone else doesn't value their talent isn't as much of a risk as they may have thought it was.
Absolutely right. And it comes down to the fact that fear is the worst motivator that I can think of, the worst foundation to make decisions on. And there's a lot of fear in corporate America. The majority of the players that are players in corporate are afraid to lose what they have. Yeah. Fear.
Oh, well, no. That's the balance, right? When you think about what they're trying to pick between, it's picking between what they have and losing what they have. Mm-hmm. That's as far as sometimes critical thinking goes. So few people are focused on what they could achieve. Everybody's focused on what they already have.
That's right.
And for me, that's exactly the opposite. We have to focus on what's possible. Focus on what you can do instead of what you have already done.
It's like a sports paradigm, a team that goes onto the field with a mindset of playing nothing but defense will eventually lose.
Will eventually lose, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, Jack, this has been an awesome conversation, and I appreciate you making time for it. I want to make sure that we let folks know how to find you, because you're out there.
Yeah,
you have
I'm out there.
Have a book. You have multiple interviews. How do people find you?
All you have to really do is Google my name, Jack Barsky, and you will find pages upon pages of links. But the best way to find me is on my website, jackbarsky.com. As simple as that. And on there's a whole lot of information. There's a bunch of videos you can find. I have a blog that I used to write more frequently into. Contact information, through the website, you can contact me. I have yet to, let me rephrase it positively, I answer every email that I get. And the best way to contact me is via email. But people who are creative even find my phone number.
You have a book out too, Jack.
Yeah,
you have a book.
The book is called Deep Undercover. It was released about 2 years ago, still available on Amazon. It's got 4.5 out of 5 ratings on Amazon, which is up there with the best. I'm very proud of it. I had a good team, I tell you. There's one thing, if you go with a publisher, if they give you a good editor, they're worth their weight in gold. My editor made the book readable. I put all the content out and all the ideas, and then he started cutting away all the extraneous stuff to make it flow.
Well, Jack, so I hope people take a chance to look up your website and to take a look at your book. I hope people make time to go out and purchase your book and read through it, because I've read some of the reviews and it's got fantastic reviews.
Right.
I've committed to myself that after I left the espionage game, I was going to stop participating in espionage fiction and espionage memoirs and everything else. I was just going to go straight to the source and talk to my friends and make new friends like you, and start teaching. Instead of just consuming, I wanted to teach these skills, because I think that they have benefited you, they've benefited me, and I think they can benefit others.
I agree. And I just wanted to point out one thing. If an individual gets in touch with me through this particular program, please point that out so we get some feedback as to, who we reach and how we reach people.
Absolutely, sir. I will do that. All right, folks. Well, Jack, I'll let you go. I know you've got a full day ahead of you, and for me, it's the end of the day. But as always, it's a great conversation, and I look forward to talking again, sir.
Okay. Take care. Good night.
Take care.